battle between Russia and Ukraine, and it's the single longest battle either of them have fought since the Second World War. So it's really quite substantial what's going on there. But because of that, it's tricky to get an accurate gauge of what is really going on. But this is what we've heard from kind of our public sources most recently. So Ukraine's top generals and military commanders have vowed to keep defending Bakhmut, which is a salt mining city in the Donetsk region of the Donbass. In his nightly address, Volodymyr Zelensky made reference to this, and he said he had held discussions with his top people about what's going on in Bakhmut, and they told him not to withdraw and instead to continue bolstering the city's defences. And here is what he said in his overnight address. I'll quote: "The command unanimously supported this position. There was no other positions. I told the commander-in-chief to find the appropriate forces to help our guys in Bakhmut." So this statement does counter what we've heard recently is from mainly the Institute of the Study of Warfare, which is a US-based think tank out of Washington, and they've kind of alluded to the idea of Ukraine carrying out a tactical withdrawal, not a full withdrawal, but they potentially moving their front line in Bakhmut to somewhere else. It kind of solidify their position and better help them defend. But as I've said a few times now on the podcast, I don't think this is the view of Ukraine itself. So despite how hard it is for their troops in Bakhmut, they believe that pain is worth enduring because they're inflicting more suffering on the attacking Russian forces. And so because of this, it's like the mixed messaging is really impossible to tell what is actually going on. But I do get the sense there's a feeling that Ukraine really wants to hold on to Bakhmut. It's become overly symbolic despite having very little strategic value in terms of the future war in the Donbass and the wider Ukraine. And I just get the sense that when you speak to kind of Ukrainians about Bakhmut, they really do feel that what they are doing to Russia in degrading the Russian forces is actually really worthwhile, and that they believe that it is genuinely hamstringing Russia, keeping them pinned down, bogged down to one position, and essentially shows the world that their Russian offensive really isn't made or cracked up to what we kind of expected. And of course, the further Ukraine can degrade Russian forces, whether it be in Bakhmut, Volodar, which we'll go on to later, that gives them a better chance when they eventually launch their own counteroffensives. So there is obviously a potential that what President Zelensky's been saying, it could be a misinformation ploy, but that's not kind of the feeling that I'm getting when speaking to Ukrainians. One other kind of thing to mention is what Ukraine is doing in holding its position in Bakhmut, keep on defending, goes against sort of advice from the US and the West in general. So when Solidar fell near Bakhmut, the Americans kind of sent a message saying, look, it doesn't, like, letting go of Bakhmut, despite you fighting so hard for it, is not a loss. It's not a defeat for you. It won't put you in sort of strategic jeopardy. And actually, Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, made this point again yesterday in public. He said the city had more symbolic value than a strategic one. And then Britain's Ministry of Defence this morning, in its daily intelligence briefing on Twitter, said the battle for Bakhmut continues to degrade both sides' capabilities. So it kind of talks to what we're speaking to there in degrading Russia. But of course, it is actually hurting Ukrainian forces too. But they are probably better supplied than Russia, thanks to all their Western backers. So the MOD says Ukraine has lightly stabilised its defensive perimeter following reported Russian advances in the north of Bakhmut. And then I'd like to point out sort of our reporting, and especially that of Verity Bowman, who interviewed a Ukrainian fighter recently injured while defending the city. So Vladislav, he basically confirmed that Ukraine was virtually encircled with Russian forces in dominant positions on all three sides. And that's not something the Ukrainians would admit lightly, so it's good to actually have that from an insider. Then I'd note another few lines that we carried in our piece in today's paper about Bakhmut and the wider war. The Kyiv Independent outlet had a fantastic report which we referenced about just how difficult it is for Ukraine on the front line. They were speaking to soldiers there. The outlet reported that mortarmen are running out of ammunition and being forced to use weapons dating back to the Second World War. Reconnaissance units no longer have enough drones to carry out their missions because of losses sustained on the battlefield. And then there are actually quite a few complaints that the ground efforts of Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut aren't being adequately supported by artillery or infantry fighting vehicles. So you can only guess, because of the pressure being put on the lone supply road into Bakhmut, that's making it very difficult for Ukraine to get supplies in. But it's also it's a tricky one of them being so close to the fighting. That is artillery going to work, and can you get infantry fighting vehicles in? Probably not. So then, yeah, it's not a great picture for the Ukrainians, but they continue fighting on. So one combat medic interviewed by the Kyiv Independent, he arrived in Bakhmut with a 500-strong battalion in December. He says that battalion is now down to 150 men. So both sides are taking significant losses, but the lion's share are being suffered by Russia. And it's believed that Russia is taking between 7 to 5 to 1 in terms of casualty rate, compared to every Russian casualty. For 5 Russian casualties, you get 1 Ukrainian in Bakhmut, is the current sort of estimate being touted by Ukrainians. And then the Russians have actually also kind of weighed in on the war in Bakhmut. And by Russia, I mean Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister. He has basically made clear that Bakhmut would give Russia's armed forces a springboard for future attacks in the Donbass. So Shoigu said the city is an important hub for defending Ukrainian troops in the Donbass. Taking it under control will allow further offensive actions to be conducted deep into Ukraine's defensive lines. Not sure I quite agree with that, and I don't think many kind of actual genuine experts would agree with that. So capturing Bakhmut would give Russia its first sort of significant battlefield victory in Ukraine since last summer. But I reference back to an Institute of the Study of War report that was recently put out, and that suggested that Russia had sustained such losses in trying to capture Bakhmut that its forces would unlikely be capable to launch anything considered serious in an attempt to further move on and keep that offensive moving on. And then there's some interesting reporting out of Volodar, which is a town closer to Donetsk, which is the biggest city in Donetsk, but only about 100 miles or so from Bakhmut. And what we're hearing from Ukrainian officials is that senior Russian officers and commanders have actually mutinied on the battlefields of eastern Ukraine in a rebellion there. So there are many reports that say as many as 300 Marines a day from Russia's 155th Brigade, which is considered an elite fighting force, are being killed every day while trying to capture Volodar. Russia is also believed to have lost at least 130 tanks and armored personnel carriers. We've covered that quite consistently during a recent 3-week battle to capture Volodar, and it's also worth saying that Ukraine is very much still in control of Volodar. And this is what a Ukrainian military official had to say. The leaders of the brigade and senior officers are refusing to proceed with a new senseless attack as demanded by their unskilled commanders to storm well-defended Ukrainian positions with little protection or preparation. So maybe it is starting to dawn on the Russians that these sort of kamikaze tactics, which are reminiscent of men being sent over the top of trenches in the First World War, running at well-fortified Ukrainian positions with nothing more than basic firearms and, in some cases, and as some reports, shovels to engage in hand-to-hand combat. It's not going particularly well from them, and potentially maybe that reality has come to bite the commanders on the backside if their men really are sort of having this mutiny. And I'll stop there for now.
Thanks very much for that, Joe. Can we also talk about a video that I think many people listening will have seen doing the rounds online yesterday? It shows a Ukrainian prisoner of war basically gunned down in cold blood. He smokes a cigarette, says Slava Ukrainia, glory to Ukraine, before being executed and shot in the head. It's obviously caused a huge reaction online across the world. Joe, this story has developed somewhat. I think we found out who this man is. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so this is this particular story is one that we led our kind of battlefield wrap on in the Telegraph newspaper today. And as David described perfectly, there was this soldier, Ukrainian soldier. He had a Ukraine flag on his epaulette, a Velcro patch there on it, and he was standing in this clearing in a forest, believed to be eastern Ukraine in occupied territory, and he was asked to remove the Ukrainian flag from his uniform, and instead said "Slava Ukraine," so glory to Ukraine, and was gunned down in multiple directions. But Kyiv has actually named the Ukrainian soldier as a Timothy Shadura of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade. So the video went viral. Quite a number of Ukrainian personnel that I follow on social media were sharing it, and this chap was hailed as a martyr. And what we know is now we can tell you that he was apparently allegedly gunned down by Russians, which Ukraine are pushing for kind of they're using this as yet another example of war crimes being committed. Killing or harming a prisoner of war is against the Geneva Convention. So if this is legitimate, as Ukraine says, then Russia looks incredibly guilty of having committed a war crime, and Ukrainian officials have vowed to go after those responsible for it. But what we know is now is yes, in yesterday's report we couldn't confirm where Timothy Shadura had been captured, where he'd been fighting. But now we know, thanks to people in Kyiv who have come out and said, look, he went missing around February the 3rd while fighting in Bakhmut. And they now say his body's been held in occupied territory in the Donbass, and that their officials are trying to negotiate the return of his body in a twinned approach to pushing those war crimes investigations and prosecutions against whoever may have been responsible for this, whether it be genuine Russian fighters, separatists, or maybe members of the Wagner group. But what we do know is moments like this, it hails back to that moment going way back now, over a year, to Snake Island, when F-off Russian warship became so prominent. It's moments like this where the Ukrainian community really do get behind their own and use their kind of wounded or killed fighters, defenders, to boost morale and carry on pushing when the times are tough. And as he was captured and taken prisoner around Bakhmut, that's likely to give the fighters in Bakhmut extra emphasis to carry on their defence of the town. And I'll stop there.
Thanks very much for that, Joe. I believe we do have our guest, Daria, who's calling in from Warsaw. Daria, could you tell us just a bit about yourself and your life prior to February 2022, and what happened at the outbreak of the full-scale invasion in your life?
Well, my life has changed a lot since last year. Domestically, I would say. I had a normal life. I used to live in Kiev. I was a co-founder of language school. And then on the 24th, I had to take my son and my cats and just leave Kiev. And that day I remember as if it was yesterday, even though it was a year ago. So I came to my parents' town and just took my mom, and 3 of us went by car to nearest border, which was Moldova, and then it took us 10 days to get from Moldova throughout 4 countries to Poland. I speak Polish, so I decided that Poland would be the best place for us to go, and especially on the way when we were in Romania, my mom had heart issues because of all the stress, and we ended up in hospital where no one could speak English or Russian or Ukrainian. And then I realized how important it is to be in the country where you can actually speak the language, especially in the situation where you are in the hospital. So we came to Poland, and I was very lucky I just went to school to sign up my son to school, to have normal life, to return to education. And as you know, this stability and this routine, it's the most important for children to be back after all the trauma that they've gone through. And after hiding in basements, bomb-proof shelters overnight, it was so difficult for us. And we just came to Poland, and my first day I went to school to sign up my son, and I just heard about teaching program sponsored by CARE. And as a teacher, I simultaneously had both. I signed up my son and I had a job. So it was a lucky day for me. And I was working in school, helping Ukrainian children adjusting to Polish education system and just to new life. Because when you think about someone who has gone through so much, especially in such a young age, and who else would understand this person better than someone who had gone through exactly the same? So it was my helping them. It was just a feeling of, unity with children and just getting back to normal life, to normality, if we can say that. And then,
sorry, please.
And then after the school year was over, I joined CARE, and now I'm working as the communications officer at CARE Poland. And now I'm helping other Ukrainian refugees, mostly women and children, getting used to new life. And we are doing different projects to just help Ukrainian women with their children.
Can I ask, as a Polish speaker, what would you say has been the Ukrainian experience in Poland? I mean, we know that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have gone to Poland. What has their life experiences been like over the past year? How have you seen your compatriots deal with the issues of, as you said, moving to a new country? And after that, maybe do tell us a little bit more about the projects you're running with Ukrainian women and their children.
I think it's very difficult in general to move to another country. But when you think about packing your life in one suitcase within 20 minutes and taking your child and going to a completely different country, it's very difficult. And for many women I've talked to, they are in Poland for the first time, they don't speak the language, and they have to not just adjust to new life, but also to look for a job, to send children to school, to look for apartments, to handle all the problems that they have. And it's been 1 year, and for many of people who had come first and those who came later, it's even worse, because people are in worse financial situation because of 1 year of the war. For many people, there is no home to return. For some people I've talked to, they said that it's not just that my home is damaged or destroyed. There is not my whole city, my entire city is destroyed. So there is nowhere to return for them. And of course, it influences emotional state, and both with, as I mentioned, financial. So it's not an easy life for sure for Ukrainian refugees in Poland and in other countries as well. That's why it's so important to continue helping and to continue just working and trying to make their lives easier. I would say that among other activities that we are doing there, tomorrow is International Women's Day. So if I may, I can just say that I will be also, there is this Walk for Women initiative from CARE International, and we will have a podcast hosted by Sophie Alex Baxter and Helen Pankhurst. And there we will have amazing women around the world telling their stories and empowering and just showing their leadership in crisis. For many women, it is important to see that, light to this is example of someone who had gone through difficulties in lives, but who had also succeeded. So I think it's also very important to just not only of course, all the programs that we are doing, we have financial support as well as accommodation, legal support, psychosocial support. This is all super important for a person who is coming to a new place and who has to just start living again, but also encouraging and helping women to feel strong in such a difficult situation. I think it's also very important. So being part of the community, being part of the moves that, especially on some holiday, on the days like International Women's Day, I think it's also very important to be, because I remember with one woman I've talked and she said that just having a talk, just sharing the experience is also important, because many women has gone through so much that they just wanted to share it. And it's good to be part of organization where we can hear those voices, where we can meet people, and being part of it, it feels just amazing to me. I'm very glad I am, part of care and doing such a job, just helping others.
Daria, would you be able to just give us a few examples of some of these stories of the women and also their children that you've spoken to? I mean, you mentioned how there are many Ukrainian children now at Polish schools. How do they get over the trauma of what they went through, and what's their life like now?
Well, I think I can speak for children that I know personally from the school that I used to work. They have changed a lot. I remember the first day I came, there was not a single smile on their faces. Children were just completely stressed, and being in a new place, in unknown school, everything was new to them. Of course, it was very difficult, but eventually they got used to, and the school with teachers and this work of assistant teacher, a Ukrainian teacher, it helps a lot. Children, they start smiling more. They liked the system, the school system in general. Polish children, they showed so much friendship and so much compassion towards Ukrainians. I remember they would approach during the breaks to Ukrainian kids, giving some small presents like pens or stickers or just some small things, but they just wanted, this was just a beginning of conversations. They tried to get to know two children and also to be just friendly, and it helped a lot. This friendly atmosphere, it breaks all the ice between different children of different countries. So I can tell. And the same, my son, he's been going to this school. This is his second year of Polish school, and he likes it a lot. He has made Polish friends already, as well as Ukrainian, of course. So he likes it, and he says that he wants to continue going to the same school. And if we talk about Ukrainian women, in my opinion, all the women that I've met are incredible, strong, and just, they show so much. You can see this leadership in each of them, because taking your child and just starting from scratch, it requires a lot of power. And I could say that the stories that impressed me most is a woman who lived in a small town of Przemysl at the border of Poland, and she's Ukrainian, and she lives there with her two children, two girls. And she was part of the community, of Ukrainian community. And one day there was, in the beginning, in March, there was this family of single mom with her daughter who came to Przemysl. And unfortunately, the mom felt bad. She was hospitalized, and she was later diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away. So the teenage girl was in a foreign country without parents, complete orphan. And this woman who is from Ukrainian community, she adopted the girl, she took her in her home. And I've talked to her recently, and she said the girl is functioning now. She started smiling, she started again being, after going through so much, she is now, she has hope for future. She wants to continue her life in Poland. So these are just small stories, of simple women who work, who do their daily jobs. But then when this war broke out, everything has changed. A lot of Ukrainians who used to live, who used to have their lives, they first became refugees, then they started being volunteers, and now they are part of community helping other refugees. So this is so inspiring how people, Ukrainian and Polish women, stand together in this crisis and help each other and encourage each other. And just, I have so many stories I can tell a lot, but how women change and how life has changed for them, but they still keep strong. And this is inspiring for me.
Well, maybe tell us a couple more at the end of this, but just quickly, you described leaving Ukraine and going to Poland, but you returned to Ukraine recently to visit your family. What was that experience like for you, and how is your family doing now?
So my trip to Ukraine was short, but very happy moment, because it was my first time over a year at home, at my hometown. I went to visit my grandma, who is 84 years old. She decided not to go with us. We wanted her to come with us. We encouraged her every day to come to Poland. But for elderly people, it is so difficult to change the position, to change home, to leave the garden and everything that they have. So I respect her choice not to go. But of course, it was difficult to leave her, and it was so great to get back together, to see her again, to spend time with her, and just to have the small chats, small talks, and to return to normal, to the feeling that used to be. And my father, he could have come with us because he is above this age rate where people can go, but he decided to stay in my native town, Kremenchuk, and just to join territorial defense of the city and to defend the city. And again, I'm very proud of him that he is doing this, especially in his age. And I'm also very afraid for him. I worry all the day for my grandma and my dad, and we keep in touch every day. But of course, it's not the same when you see someone over a year. Yeah, it was very emotional. And even now, when I remember about it, I don't know if you can hear that, but my voice is trembling because it was such a great time being again, but again, knowing that I have to go back, that it's not safe, it just breaks my heart to be away from my family and not being able to return at the moment. And you asked about the stories of women. There are so many stories. For example, I know one woman, Olga, who is leader of a feminist organization, and she conducts self-defense classes for Ukrainian women. And just again, she gathers people, and she said that last year the organization that she ran was so small, so little, and now they have every day, they have activities, they join together, they have workshops, they support each other. This is the most important in such a difficult situation. They have psychological support for women. Other Olga, who is in Warsaw, the one I've talked about, is in Krakow, in Warsaw. She's worker of information hub. She is Ukrainian who also speaks Polish fluently, so she can help Ukrainian refugees just sign up for medical assistance or for any other assistance. She knows the system well, so she can help them. There are so many women who are now part of this huge big family of assisting, and just being the most important, in my opinion, and now during this difficult period of time, is to be together, to stay together, and to support each other. So this is the goal, I think.
Just one more question from me, Daria. But you mentioned your grandmother. Your grandmother survived World War II, survived famine. I'm just wondering your thoughts about how she sees this invasion and her experiences, and how you talk to her about that. If it's not too painful to talk about that, that would be interesting.